Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the podcast. Today we have Jake Desyllas from The Voluntary Life joining us to talk about a wide range of stuff, from Jake's story, selling all his stuff, and becoming a nomad.
Minimalist.
He's also the author of a book called Job Free, where he talks about the different ways you can go to become job free. So if it's finding a job that's not a job because of something you love so much, or saving, or entrepreneurship, how to really take control of your life and not feel like you've got to be waking up every morning and going in to do something you don't really want to do. So we touch on that. We touch on his personal story of travel and how he got into it, and a wide range of other things.
Yeah, definitely. And it's pretty interesting because Jake and his wife for a long time put their stuff in storage, would travel somewhere for quite a while, come back to the UK where they're based out of. And then they just decided that it was too much. So they sold their apartment, sold all their stuff, and now everything that they own, they actually have with them. And so they spent quite a long time living in Panama. And we touched base with Jake on a visit back to the UK. They're currently trying to expatriate from the United Kingdom. So that's what's brought them or him back at the moment. So without further ado, here's Jake.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Jake. We're really excited to have you. And as we were preparing today, we had so many things that we want to talk to you about. We want to talk to you about your book, Job Free. We want to talk to you about your history traveling, your history as an entrepreneur. But we thought a good place to start would be your move down to Panama to start long-term, slow traveling. What were the steps that kind of led up to deciding to sell your apartment and take off to Central America?
Hi, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So the steps leading up to it were, this was a long process. We started traveling a few years before we moved to Panama. We realized that we just didn't need to be in the UK. After I sold my business, I was able to, work from anywhere because I write and do podcasts and so forth. And my wife has an online business. So we started spending big chunks of time abroad. We were going to live in Mexico for 6 months one time, another time for 7.5 months. And we traveled all the way through Latin America as well. Went through Argentina and up through Chile. And so we realized that, when we were coming back to the UK, it was really nice to have our place in the UK. But it was also, there are hassles involved in being a landlord. There's the responsibility of having to make sure that everything works out with your apartment and so forth. And there's also the question of all of our stuff and putting all of our stuff in storage. And we basically decided that rather than going back and forth and being landlords and dealing with tenants, and we did have some problems because unfortunately, if you rent out your apartment sort of say for 6 or 7 months, you tend to get students and we had some one tenant burnt one of our cushions and another another one broke a few things, and these are all just minor hassles. But in the end, we just decided we've been moving towards this lifestyle of increasing minimalism, and initially that was for practical purposes, but it actually just became quite liberating as well to get rid of a lot of the clutter and junk that we had, and we just decided to kind of push that to, I guess, its logical conclusion, which was to say, well, rather than coming back and forth, why don't we just sell everything and then move to Panama and then see where we want to go and, see where we want to spend some time after that. And so eventually we decided to do that. And so I think the whole process of moving towards a minimalist lifestyle and selling everything really took over a couple of years. But it was, the last 6 months of selling our place and selling our stuff was when it got really intensive.
Yeah, definitely. I know that we've put stuff in storage units both times we've gone on big trips, and this is sort of the first time where we've kind of limited ourselves to what we have in our current place, plus we each have a closet at each of our parents' house. And even that feels like too much stuff sometimes.
Yeah, you always get this funny feeling. We've done 2 6-month trips. And both times we like struggled to fit everything into a storage unit. And then you come home afterwards and you're like, God, why did I keep so much of this stuff? Like 75% of it I could have just thrown out beforehand or sold beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't miss it. And you forget about a lot of the stuff. And then, you know, I found unpacking boxes like, oh wow, I still got all of this clutter, which I don't really use and I don't really need. And I think, you know, it gives you a chance to be more conscious about what the purpose of owning stuff is and what fulfillment it brings you. And in the end, the other thing that's happened in the last 10 years is that it's also just become far easier to get rid of stuff, because so much of the possessions that you used to need to own, you can now either rent or use, or you know, the internet provides alternatives for so much stuff. So, for example, I store all my data online, and I've gone paperless, and these kinds of things mean that, you know, whereas I used to need shelves and shelves for lots of books and papers and things like that, now that's all just in the cloud. So it's way easier.
Yeah, definitely. That's an awesome point. And was there any like point along that way where you're like, oh, we can't get rid of this thing, like, oh, I really like this thing? Or did it just get to a point where you were just getting rid of it all and you were fine with it?
I found that it got progressively harder, because when you start selling off stuff, you know, at least I went for the easy wins first. So there was loads of the old clothes and things that I didn't need anymore that were just no-brainers to sell. You know, I knew that I wasn't going to be, I had all this ski stuff, right? And my wife doesn't like skiing. I hadn't been skiing for years. And so I realized, like, I'm not using this. So that was an easy decision to get rid of. And so the first steps are the easiest. And then it started to get harder, because I left those items to last that had a lot more emotional significance for me and had a lot more unresolved sort of feelings associated with them. So, for example, I owned a guitar that I had since I was a teenager. And this guitar I'd taken with me everywhere from place to place. And even though there were some years when I was just, in fact, many years when I just didn't play at all. I had no energy to play when I was building my business and in sort of the very hardworking years. But I still kept this guitar, and I kept it partly because, you know, to give it up would be to admit that I wasn't really playing it anymore. And that was a difficult thing to sort of think about. And in the end, what happened was that after I sold my business, I actually did have a chance to do a lot more creative and expressive and improvising type things with my life. So I actually joined a band and played my guitar again very intensely for a year. Yeah. And I also, you know, I've been writing and doing other things. And now I didn't really feel like giving up that guitar would be such a big deal, because I have lots of creative outlets in my life, and I did love the guitar, and it was kind of hard to sell it. But you know, there's other things that I do, and after I'd stopped playing in a band, I wasn't again using it that much. So it was time to recognize that I was holding on to this with the idea that I'm a regular guitar player when really I wasn't. And so, and I have other ways of sort of finding creative outlets now. And, you know, maybe I'll buy another one again in the future. But I think the other thing was that I had invested this particular guitar with a lot of, it had a lot of memories for me, and it had a lot of emotion attached to it. So that's the kind of thing that's harder to sell for me, was the stuff that I left until last that had, you know, a lot of memories attached to it. And I found that it was kind of part of the process of decluttering was to come to terms and think through, why am I holding on to this stuff? What does it mean for me? And what can I do to meet those psychological needs in different ways?
Yeah, that's a really good point. How kind of these like physical objects can kind of take on and become kind of like part of your identity in a way.
Yeah.
And when I was listening to a few podcasts with you when you were talking about selling all your things and moving down to just having 2 bags basically. And the thing that came to mind for me was books. I've just been like kind of a hoarder of books in a way. And
hoarder is a good word for that.
like moved down to Atlanta and like, I just got to stop buying books. Did you have any experience like shifting to completely digital book wise?
Yeah, I was exactly like you. And that was initially, I couldn't bear the idea of getting rid of all my books. They were definitely part of sort of my identity. I think I kept them like trophies as well, because it felt like an achievement to have read these books, right? And I didn't want to forget that I'd read these books, because I liked the ideas in them, and I felt they'd enriched my life too. And so I wanted the books also to remind myself of what I've read. But having shelves of books is a very expensive reminder, because you need all that space, and they're heavy, and then you've got to pack them up in boxes and take them elsewhere, and they're just a major hassle. And so that was actually really liberating, was getting rid of my books. I thought that would be a sacrifice, but actually I found that, now I don't have any books. I have much better ways of reminding myself of what I've read. I just keep a reading journal. I've written down all the books that I've read, and I keep notes on them in Evernote. And so now that's actually a lot more searchable, because I have a tag for books in Evernote, and I can see all the books I've read, and I've got my notes there with each of the book notes, if you like, and it just means that that's with me all the time, and I can even search my notes as well, so I can remember what I thought about some of the books. And I found that, it's so liberating not to have to keep all that stuff on the shelf. And you can always get books again if you want to. Since I sold all my books, I've had to repurchase, I think, 3 books in the last 5 years. And, so that means probably maybe I'm going to have to purchase 6 books per decade again for all the ones that I've got. I think that's an acceptable price. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not only that, but if you get them again, you can get them, most of them you can get as ebooks, and that means you can always have them with you. And it's just so much easier not to have to keep all of that stuff. And in the end, I also found that some of the books that I knew I wouldn't be able to get again because they're rare and they're not in ebook format, I just scanned them. So I have them digitally as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool.
When you were working through building your business up, and you kind of said like the harder years where you're working hard, was this vision of traveling the world something you had in your mind, or is this kind of something that if you told Jake Desyllas from 5 years ago that he'd be living in Panama, no apartment in the UK, would that be surprising to him?
Well, so 5 years ago was probably when we first started thinking about this kind of thing, because that was around the time that I just sold my business, and my wife and I had moved out of London, moved down to Brighton, and we were kind of thinking about what's next. And initially, when we got the place in Brighton, we did plan to stay in the UK long term, and that's one of the reasons why we bought a place. We sort of thought, okay, well, this will be a nice place to live, and we can do trips out from here. So I think 5 years ago, we were already starting to reevaluate that plan as we did more travel. But while I was building my business, I was super focused on the work. And I sort of saw it more in terms of, I want to really be 100% involved in this project of building this business. And I felt very passionately about it. And I really believed in what we were doing. But I also wanted to have another phase of life afterwards. I always thought that there would be a chance to do this really intensive thing and then hopefully sell the business and do other things in the future. And what those other things were, I left pretty open. I've always loved travel, so that was always something that I kept in the back of my mind, but I didn't have like a specific plan of, I want to, in the future, to be living in other places. I just thought I want freedom. And for me, the freedom to do whatever I feel like doing is such a valuable thing. And since I do enjoy travel, it's not surprising that it ended up travel being a key part of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome to hear that you were so in your business 100% with that, and then kind of found like the travels and living a really free life after that.
Yeah, I mean, that to me was always the main goal. And one of the things that I write about a lot is in terms of what you want to achieve from business and also from personal finance. For me, freedom is so important that I think where a lot of people get stuck in the rat race is in getting caught up in consumption and getting caught up in thinking that the way to enjoy life is to buy more stuff, because buying stuff gives you comfort, and that's sort of what life's all about. And, I love buying things, and I've got nothing against material possessions per se, But there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is between, do you want to own stuff in your house, which also has all the associated maintenance cost of looking after your stuff and maintaining and so forth, or do you want more financial independence, financial freedom to be able to do whatever you want with your day and live in any way that you choose? And that to me was always the most exciting thing, was how can I have more freedom to spend time, the most precious thing I have, the time of my life, in the way that I want to.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we can both definitely relate to. And I think a lot of people who listen to the podcast can relate to, where, for example, right after university, we went out traveling and had this experience of, it kind of like freedom to just, instead of being kind of, you spend so many years going through the school system learning what to do every single day, came out from that on a 6-month trip, really kind of feel this feeling of being alive, exploring the world, come back and kind of just hop into, kind of like you said, the rat race. And so many people on the show have had those big experiences traveling and then come back into a job, get kind of caught up in material consumptions, buying things, going out for dinner with friends, drinks with friends after work, and don't really know how to turn this experience they had of feeling like free into something that they can have as part of their daily life.
Yeah, it's difficult because you are set in school, especially, and university too, on the sort of employee track. That's what life is about, is finding a job. Mm-hmm. And then, what having a job is about is getting promoted and getting a raise and moving into, achieving more responsibilities in your job and having which ultimately is always about somebody else determining your purpose and mission in your work. And your reward for all that is the pay, which you can then, buy some comforts with. Obviously, the alternative is the entrepreneurial life, which is more about you deciding the purpose and your mission in terms of your work, and you taking the risk of the venture itself too. And you also having the opportunity to think, how can I do this in such a way that, rather than just losing so much in income tax, I'm pursuing more of an investment in my business and being able to build value that eventually will give me more freedom too. So that was the route that I eventually ended up taking. And I think it's difficult to find that, or at least it was difficult for me to find that, because nobody gets taught how to be an entrepreneur in school.
Yeah. And I think your book, Job Free, does a really good job of outlining ways that people can take to find that freedom, if it's not entrepreneurship, a lifestyle business, or some other routes with savings, or finding a job that's not really a job for them.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I wanted to try and find ways to show not just like, look, this is how I chose my lifestyle and you should do it like me, but rather say, here's alternatives that achieve similar ends to what I think is really, fun, is being able to live free of jobs and do what you like. And you don't have to do it my way. You can do, there's other people who I've interviewed and written about who've chosen their own paths and have achieved more freedom in their own way.
Yeah, I think that's super cool and relatable for a lot of different people, because I feel like sometimes it's easy to look at somebody and be like, well, you did that. Like, that's great for you. I'd love to live like that, but I can't do that. And I feel like when you show different ways of doing that, it's a lot more relatable to people, and it kind of forces them to face that, like, that I can't. Like, why can't you? Like, all these other people did it in all these different ways. Like, you can.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear, did any of the different routes towards job freedom particularly resonate for yourselves?
So it's kind of, I was just like thinking back on the path we've taken. So we graduated university, went traveling, came back, kind of just hopped onto the career train and spent 2 years working in jobs that we both didn't really find fulfilling, saved up some money, went traveling again. And when we came back the second time, we were just like, no, not doing that again. So we kind of went the unjobbing route.
Right.
Moved to Canmore and Banff, if you're familiar with that, Banff National Park in Canada.
No, I'm not.
So yeah.
Is it a nice place?
Yeah, it's like a really popular tourist destination in a national park. There's a bunch of ski hills, amazing hiking, and just kind of got jobs. I was working as a cook, trying to just do like something really skillful, but not at all career oriented. And Amanda worked in a retail store, but just to have a job that allowed us to do all these other things we want, like hiking and work on our podcast on the side. And then it's kind of transitioned more into the lifestyle business, where we're trying to build travel podcast and a couple other things around that to allow us to be fully nomadic and traveling around the world, supporting ourselves that way.
Cool. That's great to hear.
Yeah. And then extreme savings is something that I think we've both had our eye on lately, where we're like, we need to do better in that way.
Yeah. I don't know. Do better is like we're doing wrong. I feel like we're doing pretty well, but yeah, it's easy for me to, if I'm not saving for something specific, it's easy for me to spend money on things like clothing or food or dinners out with friends or even experiences wherever I am. Like I'm visiting Ryan in Atlanta and I really want to get the most out of being in the southern US because I might never be back here. But then at the same time, reminding myself that I don't need to spend so liberally. Like, oh, you probably don't need that sweater. Like, oh, you probably don't need that thing.
Yeah, I found it really interesting to learn from people who've chosen that lifestyle, because it wasn't the lifestyle that I chose. And, you know, I also look back on many years of my spending habits and think, wow, I thought I was pretty frugal, but I could have saved way more than I did. And I think it's tough because, that's another thing that it's really, the entire culture is set up against you when it comes to saving. You know, money is inflated, so it's losing value. So you have this sense of like, well, if you don't spend it today, it's going to be worth less tomorrow anyway. And at the moment, we have such like really artificially low interest rates that you can't just save in a bank. You have to find ways to invest money that are actually going to overcome these incredibly low interest rates. And yeah, the culture all around is set up that, you know, if you're not consuming more stuff, then you must be a loser because you must not have money, as opposed to the idea that saving itself gives you positive value because it gives you freedom for the future. So I can totally relate. I found it really eye-opening to sort of read about that as an opportunity to gain more freedom. And it's something that I think I didn't come into contact with earlier in my life and see as a kind of viable route to more freedom.
Yeah, we actually just last week interviewed a woman who went to law school at 26, took on $100,000 in law school debt, worked for 6 years, saved 80% of her income, just recently retired at 33, and is now, I think she was down in South America, just kind of living life. But 6 years as a lawyer.
That's the classic extreme savings type approach. Save like more than 50%, ideally 75, 80%, and just really live frugally. And, you know, there are people who do that, and it does work for those who are able to stick to that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think my biggest thing is talking to her. I was like, wow, this is so incredible. And I was like, what do you do when you like want something and you just want this thing and you're like, oh, I shouldn't buy this thing. She's like, I don't usually want that much stuff. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, this is one area where I think actually minimalism is really helpful, because I have also found that now that I fit all of my stuff into one suitcase and one carry-on bag, it does totally change my perspective when we go shopping or walk around, walk around a marketplace or a shopping center or something like that. I don't look at things and think, oh, I could buy that, because I haven't got anywhere to put that stuff. So it kind of gives me a different frame of reference to think about buying things. Mm-hmm. And I think if you especially when I first bought a flat, I was living in a place that I bought for the first time, and I thought about all the things that I could do to improve this place and buy things and buy furniture and stuff for the walls. And, after a while, it starts to accumulate, and you're kind of on track to spend more and buy more because of having made that one decision of buying the flat leads to all these other purchasing decisions. And in a way, now that we live in rental places, and we obviously rent out furnished places, and you can get really good quality living in Latin America for, cheaper than you can in Britain, for example. Mm-hmm. But of course, it's not your stuff. And sometimes the furniture isn't exactly the way that I would have decided to buy it. But I don't care because, life's too short to worry about that kind of stuff. And I sort of, in a way, that whole area of spending is just no longer in my mind of, what kind of furniture should we get for the flat or something. I don't even think about that because we just get a rental place and then get on with living,
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I love that way of thinking. Is it difficult if you guys go home and you see sort of like your family and friends like living this more material lifestyle? Is it kind of like, oh, you've been wearing that same shirt for like 2 years now?
That's an interesting question because we've actually just been through and visited some friends in New Hampshire, and we're back in the UK, and so we're seeing friends and here and so forth. But no, I don't really feel. I don't miss it. I don't miss the idea of owning a place and getting more stuff, because ultimately, we could always go back to doing that if we wanted to. There's nothing stopping us from changing our lifestyles if we chose to. So this is definitely we're doing this because it's fun. And the moment it stops being fun, then we'll reconsider. Like, I don't have any ideological commitment to, we must be minimalists for any sort of ideological purpose. We're doing it because this is just a really fun way to live, and it gives us the freedom and the opportunity to travel, and it's very easy for us to go and visit people and see people and stuff like that. So I haven't experienced missing out on having more stuff, especially not clothes, because ultimately what I found, you were asking about clothes. I mean, what I found was when I decluttered my clothes was that I really wore 20% of my clothes most of the time, and 80% of the time of my clothes hardly at all.
Yeah.
And so actually, it was kind of pointless having it there. And there is a certain amount of decision fatigue that goes with having all of that stuff, because you think, oh, what am I going to wear today? Am I going to wear this or that? You got all these clothes, but actually, I only really liked 20% of my clothes. Like, really loved, right? The rest were just stuff I had. Now I love all the clothes that I've got because I just get the good stuff, right? And so, I really don't mind. I'm very lucky because my wife has a similar philosophy on life. So she doesn't mind the fact that I'm obviously not wearing different outfits every day that are radically different. I've got a limited set of clothes. I don't mind the fact that she has a limited set of clothes, because we both, we value other things.
Yeah.
And we really love spending time together. We don't care about that kind of thing. So I think, I don't really miss it at all. But as soon as we do, if it changes and if we don't enjoy this anymore, then we'll just change and change our lifestyles.
Cool. I love that.
What was the reaction like in your social circle and with your family back home to your decision to move away and sell all your stuff?
I think everyone in my social circle has been very supportive, and I think we've found that people are curious of what we're doing, and definitely want to know about it. That's probably also because it's really important to me, the people in my social circle, that they are supportive too. I do know that, for example, when I've seen some people who have a travel lifestyle, and especially an early retirement lifestyle, when they get written about in the media, then there's a lot of people who write really scathing comments. Some of my friends who I've met through doing my podcast, who I've interviewed, who are early retirees and travel the world, have had articles written about them. Here's people who've quit the rat race and retired early, and some of the comments on those articles on newspaper or magazine websites are people saying, "Oh, this is impossible," and these people. It just really scathing and critical, and like a lot of it definitely evokes a lot of bad feelings in some people. I haven't had that, I'm really pleased to say, but I think that comes from people who don't know you, who probably see this lifestyle as an implicit criticism of their lifestyle. Like, I know I have had a few comments online and stuff of people who have basically said that early retirement is impossible, and that one of the things is like, yeah, well, you were just lucky and nobody else could do this type of thing. And one of the reasons I wrote Job Free was because I wanted to show that, look, you don't have to be an entrepreneur and you don't have to sell a business. There's lots of other ways of doing this too. But I know that some people take this as an implicit criticism of their lifestyle. And I think some people find it challenging too, because if you've been spending a lot of money on stuff that doesn't necessarily bring you a huge amount of freedom, and then you see somebody else who doesn't bother spending money on those things and then has the opportunity to go and travel and do other things, then it immediately raises the question, well, why didn't I do that? Yeah. And I think some people find that very challenging. So I'm very lucky and pleased to say that I've not had that amongst my friends and amongst my social circle, but I think it is something that some people feel, especially if they don't know you. And, I think that's sad, because it's an opportunity when you see other people's lifestyles. It's an opportunity to be more conscious about why you choose the things that you choose to spend money on. And sometimes that does mean recognizing that sometimes, you spend money on stuff that turns out to not bring you fulfillment. I've had that experience. There's lots of things that I've spent money on that, looking back on it now, I can say, well, that was kind of pointless. But it's an opportunity, if you're willing to think about it and be honest with yourself, then there's always an opportunity to change course and to actually turn your life around and start changing the way that you spend and changing the way that you save and changing the way that you plan for the future, so that you can have a life that's more aligned with your values and more towards what you want from life.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point, that like, just because you've gone down a certain path doesn't mean you can't change direction later.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really tough, especially because a lot of people have a huge amount of debt. And that was something that I never had. Well, actually, it's not true. When I started my business, I actually borrowed huge debts for the business, and I was personally liable for those. And I worked really hard to pay them off. But I've never taken consumer debt. And, at least the advantage with the debt that I took on was it was building a productive business. I think some people have taken on consumer debts to buy stuff. And then then you've got, a doubly hard journey to work back, because you've got to pay off all the debt first, and then you can start saving for more financial independence. But even then, there's lots of people out there who write about their experiences of paying off their debt and doing that. So that's a possibility too. It's just, you've got to actually want it. And I think the other thing is, you have to gain fulfillment, not just from the end goal, but from the journey. It has to be fulfilling to work towards freedom itself. I mean, for example, I didn't build a business in order to make money. I built a business because it was fulfilling, building a business. And the making money part was great too. But if I'd only wanted, the end goal, then it would have been 10 years of really hard work that I wouldn't have enjoyed. So I think you have to enjoy the journey as well, whichever of these lifestyles you choose.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of the stuff about especially saving, like, oh, you just need to like turn down your spending number and keep making the same money and you'll go off on this great course. I think it can be tough for some people to connect with, because it's not just like simply a matter of numbers and income and spending. It's like such an emotional thing where maybe the work they're doing is extremely unfulfilling and they kind of feel like they're sacrificing in some way to do it. And so the spending of money is really therapy. So that's the thing that gives them emotional satisfaction. And the idea of turning down that spending is like turning off the tap that's nourishing them emotionally in some ways. Not that that's a good strategy to be finding emotional fulfillment from buying things, and it doesn't work that well, but it is kind of a reality for some people in that position.
Yeah, it's a psychological game.
Totally. And I think that the psychological challenge is always the hardest in these things. But the way that I like to think about it is that is, in a way, it's like entrepreneurship, for example, building a business. That is a psychological challenge, and it is an opportunity for you to challenge yourself, because when you challenge yourself, you grow. You have to, otherwise your business isn't going to survive. And it's the same with changing your lifestyle habits. It has been at times extremely uncomfortable to get rid of all my stuff and to think about becoming an expat and to move outside of the patterns of living that I have known and that are easy to me and that I'm very comfortable in. Like it's been uncomfortable. It hasn't all been fun. And like I was talking earlier on, selling some of my stuff wasn't fun. It was actually psychologically, it involved me having to have a real think through, like, okay, what's going on for me? Why do I want this? And, what am I going to do about this conflict between what I want? I want to be able to travel. On the other hand, I do want to keep this guitar, and, what am I going to do? And that's just a sort of trivial example, but that happened with loads of different things. And it happened with all of the decisions that we had to make to leave the comfort zone of England and think about, what being a slow traveler through the world would be like. But I think that's an opportunity to grow too. Being in Panama and trying to improve my Spanish, sometimes it's uncomfortable, it's embarrassing. Sometimes it can even be kind of stressful because it's a lot easier to buy things in your native language.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a chance for personal growth too. It's a chance to challenge myself and put myself outside my comfort zone and to experience things that are going to be ultimately are going to give me a more rounded life. And I think that's that's the positive way of thinking about these challenges, that, if you've been spending money, for example, because there are things in your life that are depressing, and that this is an attempt to try and brighten up your life a little bit, then it's going to be challenging to change your habits and to change the way that you live. But it's an opportunity to actually use that challenge to grow and to get more from life too.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that really resonates with me. And it's cool hearing you talk about being in Panama and feeling sort of intimidated to speak Spanish and really overcoming that, because I found that was something that was huge for me when we were in South America. And it was kind of like these small wins became so fulfilling. Like if I could order a meal in Spanish and get exactly what I wanted, like I was like, yes, I got like the chicken and rice. I felt so good with my day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had lots of little experiences of just like getting things wrong. And I remember I went into, when we first arrived in Panama, I wanted to get a haircut and I was kind of tired and I forgot, I got mixed up between the word hombres and hermanos, and between men and brothers. And instead of asking for a haircut for men, I asked for a haircut for brothers. and they also didn't quite understand what I was saying, and they thought I was saying manos as in hands. So they thought I was asking for to have my nails done. So I showed up for the appointment, and they were ready to do my nails, and we realized that there'd been a big misunderstanding. This is the kind of thing that you just in a way it's fun. It's embarrassing, but it's also fun to go out there and meet people, experience different cultures, and actually learn to adapt to different circumstances.
Yeah.
So how has daily life been in Panama?
Well, I mean, so as I said, we're in the UK at the moment, but in Panama, daily life was really just a lot of fun. We had a great apartment in a really nice area. There's some areas of Panama that are very car oriented, but we were in one area which is actually has a bit more street life. And so we had a really nice apartment. Panama is one of those places where you have apartments that have they have a so-called area social, which is generally it's like a pool and a sun deck and an outdoor area that is in a part of the apartment block, and you get access to that, and they have a gym and so forth. So you can find places with really nice facilities a lot cheaper than in the UK. It's not quite as cheap as some other Latin American countries because Panama is a developed city. But what I really enjoyed about Panama is that it's a very dynamic place. I got involved in a program for mentoring entrepreneurs, and we've met friends there. And, we just really like the lifestyle and the atmosphere, because you're able to get a lot done. You can get anything you want. There's always anything you want from malls or supermarkets or anything, it will be there. But there's also, it's beautifully hot. You get some incredible thunderstorms. Not so much now, but in the summer, or rather in July, August, September, you get these, especially later, actually, October, November, you get these incredible thunderstorms and really intense rain. But then an hour later, it's beautiful sunshine again.
Wow.
So, it's a very beautiful country too. We've traveled around a bit and seen other parts of the country, and we're thinking of trying to find a place more on the coast that would be more of a beach living, because I just really like the beach. And Panama City itself is very urban. It's like, and I like urban living too, but it's not as walkable as some of the places that we've lived. And that is something that I really enjoy as a quality of life, is to be able to walk places.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that too. And being by the beach is always amazing.
Yeah.
So you guys are planning on going back to Panama then?
Yeah. And we're going to think about, we're going to be in the UK for a while, and then we're going to go back and look into, we'll spend some more time in Panama City at first, but then we're going to look into, probably staying in a more beach oriented location.
Has it been challenging, to not have a permanent address in your home country?
Yeah, there are practical challenges with that. I mean, you can, we've done various things. We've had a mailbox is one way that we did it, which, get all your mail forwarded to. And the other thing is we've had, we've got addresses in the UK, friends and family and so forth that we can use. And there are also mail scanning services, where if all your mail goes to a place and they open and scan it for you, and then you can get it wherever. And we've tried all of these different solutions, and they all have their kind of pros and cons. It's one of those things that is a bit of a hassle. There are still some things that we are still working through, and that's actually one of the reasons that we're back in the UK. Is that, there are some admin type things to do with how to organize, things like our UK bank accounts when we're abroad, and what do we need to do, and how are we going to get access to things. And so there are a lot of hassles involved in doing this, especially if you intend to expatriate fully, which we do, and which we've not yet fully done. If you're going and coming back, then it's not such a big deal. But to make the full move to no longer being residents in the UK, there's quite a lot of hoops to jump through. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a long process, and there are some annoying admin type hassles involved, which is sort of, there are downsides to this lifestyle too, and that's definitely one of them, is the bureaucracy involved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that's something that we've even just experienced in like 6 month bursts of traveling. Like, for example, one of my credit cards got compromised while we were in Argentina, and it was this whole process because the bank is confused as to how to get the mail to me. So they're sending it to my parents. My parents are scanning it to me. I'm trying to print it out at like a convenience store print shop, and it's got all my banking information on it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yikes. Like, it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, I just wish that this was easier.
Yeah. And Panama, unfortunately, also, it's not really reliable to get mail delivered to your residential address. You have to, if you want to get mail, you have to use one of the mail services. So there are some downsides to that too.
Has living in Panama given you any appreciation for the UK? I know we were talking to someone who lives in Costa Rica, and she was talking about how it's kind of given her a bit of appreciation for how smooth things function back in the US. Have you had any experiences with that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, it's not the case that some people move abroad and they seem to find in the place that they've moved to that, this is just the best of everything. You know, I found this is the place that I truly belong. I mean, there are definitely pros and cons to all the places that we go to. And one of them that comes to mind for me, especially now that we're back in the UK at the moment, is, as I was saying before, I love walking. I really enjoy walking, and I enjoy a walking-oriented lifestyle. Panama City is just not easy to walk around. It's very car-oriented. And consequently, I mean, it's very easy to get around because they have Uber there, and the Uber is incredibly cheap. Mm-hmm. And so you can just jump in an Uber whenever you want. And there's a metro line, and there are taxis and so forth. But I just, as a quality of life, I love to be able to go for a long walk each day, and I listen to audiobooks while I'm doing it, and that's just not as easy to do there. So that's one of the things, for example, that I really appreciate about the UK, is that there's so many easy places to walk. We're currently in Brighton on the south coast, and I can go for a walk along the seafront, and it's really nice. So there's definitely downsides to everywhere, and I think that's one of the reasons why we want to go back to. We're going to go back to Panama after being here for a while, but we also want to just live in other places too, because I think part of the experience for us is we're not looking for that perfect place. We're looking to experience the world and see, obviously we want to go to really nice places, but I think there are downsides to each country that you visit. And so Panama has other downsides too. I don't want to paint a truly rosy picture. There are other things about Panamanian society and about the things that are going on there that are not great. But my point is just in terms of thinking about where we want to be. We want to experience different parts of the world, because that's part of the joy, is actually just seeing how places are different, rather than trying to find the one place that's going to be perfect.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good mindset. I mean, I sort of feel like you'd be searching forever if you were trying to find that one perfect place in most cases. I'm curious how you guys choose a place to go and live or to travel in for an extended period of time.
Well, I mean, we have some things that I like, and some things that Hannah likes, where those intersect. That's sort of where we tend to go. So, for example, Hannah really likes warm places, so and I do too. So we've done, and of course, this is a very popular thing, is to go, if you're going to leave cold places like Britain, you might as well go somewhere where it's nice and sunny. That's definitely been one of the things. As I mentioned before, I really like the beach, and that's been one of the things about Panama City that I've missed. Is just it's great to be close to the sea. I really like that. Then there are also practical concerns about things like residency, how long you can stay, how easy it is to be in a country. I mean, for example, we have lots of friends in the States, and although the States isn't cheap, we would totally be interested in going to live there, but it's just not something that's doable because of the restrictions on residency and on even on tourist visas. Mm-hmm. So there are practical considerations there, and one of the nice things about a lot of the places in South America is that you can stay for at least 6 months, and often you can just go off and renew your visa and come back in many of those countries. So if you're aiming to do the kind of lifestyle that we want to do, then Latin America is very good for that. The other thing is obviously cost, and traveling is an opportunity to have a good quality of life, and yet also not spend more or spend less. And Mexico, for example, has been one of the places that we've really enjoyed staying in, because you can just have a really great quality of life, and it's so cheap in comparison to the UK. Panama is not that cheap, but it's definitely still cheaper. But Panama also has other advantages too, and one of the key ones that has been really important is that there's a well-established residency program where you can, if you get a lawyer and get all of do everything correctly, then it's fairly easy to establish residency if you're from the UK or the US or other nations in this. They have this thing called the Friendly Nations Visa Program, and so it's relatively easy to establish residency. And they also have a policy that income earned abroad is not taxable in Panama. So if you do end up fully expatriating, which we will do eventually, then, if you're earning income abroad, you're not paying any tax in Panama, which is a huge opportunity. If you have a business abroad, if you're running a business online and so forth, then there's lots of, there's great tax advantages too. So, that's been one of the considerations about Panama, is that when we eventually do fully, move over there, then we'll have that advantage too.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Are there any places on your, I guess, like kind of bucket list to go to while you're living this more nomadic lifestyle?
Yeah, Hannah really wants to go to Southeast Asia, Thailand, and possibly Vietnam, and just generally that whole area. So we're definitely thinking about that. I'd also really like to spend time traveling through Australia and New Zealand, because I have not been to New Zealand, but I really enjoyed my time in Australia. And it's not a cheap place compared to some of the other places, but it's also a very beautiful country. And sometimes it's actually just nice to go to a country where it's easy. Having spoken about all of the fun of the challenge of learning Spanish and stuff, it's also sometimes fun just to be able to speak English, and it makes things very easy, but you still get to experience life in a different place and different travel experiences too. So I would like to go back to Australia and to explore New Zealand. So, some point in the future, those are definitely areas on our bucket list.
Yeah. And I can really relate to what you're saying about the Spanish and switching to English. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about a traveling lifestyle, is that so much of life is about finding a nice balance, and you can really kind of inject more of that balance into your life when you're moving somewhere and getting all these challenges on a day-to-day basis. Like, for example, if you go to Thailand and it's hard to cross the street and find a restaurant, and there's all this craziness going on, and it's kind of like a bit of a struggle at the time, but it feels fulfilling. But then you can hop over into New Zealand, and it's you get to truly appreciate how nice it is to be in a culture where everyone speaks the same language, and the air is fresh, and like you don't feel like you're going to get robbed, and no one's trying to scam you.
Flushing toilets.
But then once that gets old, you can move somewhere else, and you can have that challenge again until it gets old.
Yeah. Funnily enough, the other place that by the way, I totally agree with all of that. And one of the other places that we will probably spend some time is actually Germany, because I speak German and we have friends in Germany. And so, we'll have a chance to go and spend some time staying there too.
Oh, that's cool.
So the kind of long-term nomadic lifestyle is definitely something we're kind of pursuing. But one thing that comes to my mind for me is it must be hard to build and maintain a sense of community when you don't have one home base that you're going to be in for years at a time. Have you found that at all?
Yeah, I think it is. And that's probably the biggest challenge. I think, for us, we have friends now all over the world, but there's limits on how much time we can actually really spend with them, and proper face-to-face time as well. And so I think it's definitely one of the biggest challenges of long-term travel. Also, when we have kids, that's going to be another one. I know there are people who do the long-term travel thing with kids, and I think there's an incredible opportunity for kids to have an amazing experience traveling when young. When I was actually a kid, we went to live in Italy for a year, and I was only 4 years old, but I do have memories of that time and very fond memories too. And so I think there's great opportunities there, but that will be a challenge too. And I think the practical stuff is a hassle, but it's all totally surmountable, and it's just a question of getting the practical stuff done. In a way, the real challenge is the psychological side of, okay, well, how do we stay connected to people, have a sense of community, even though we're not necessarily able to spend that much time in one place. And of course, obviously, things like Skype and Facebook and other ways of staying connected really help, but they are different to spending time with people. And there's I don't think there's an easy answer to that one. It is a challenge. It would be great to live in one place with loads and loads of people who are part of our community. And I've really enjoyed the times in my life when I've lived in places where I have a community around me in that way. But on the other hand, it's an incredible experience to travel too. So we're trying to find a balance where we stay in touch with people using the internet. We visit people and we think about places that we go as part of our chance to actually meet up with people. I mean, I mentioned that we'll probably go to Germany, and one of the reasons is because of the people. That's actually why we'll probably spend time there. We would like to spend more time in the States because we have friends there too. So it's going to be slightly different with the UK, because when we do fully expatriate, we won't be able to spend a lot of time in the UK because of basically the way that the rules work about whether or not you've become an expat. And so that's going to be a challenge, and we'll have to think about that and look at the ways that we can stay connected with people here. But it is a challenge.
Yeah.
So when you're expatriating, is that actually getting rid of your passport and your citizenship?
No, not at all. So there's a difference between citizenship, nationality and residency. Okay. So we won't be getting rid of our citizenship. We'll still be UK citizens, but we'll just be expats, which will mean that we won't be resident in the UK. And that just means that we will no longer actually have the UK as our residency. So while we've been traveling, just spending some months abroad, although we've been abroad, the UK has remained our residency, and it still is at the moment. But when we finally get all of the paperwork and everything sorted that we need to get sorted, then we will actually stop being residents of the UK. And so, there's a difference between residency and citizenship, and you can be we will remain British citizens, but we'll just be living abroad.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't really sure the difference of that between, obviously I know people who are, British or American or Australian who have got their residency in Canada, and I know more of the rules around that just because I have friends who have done it, but I don't actually know any Canadians who have, I guess, relinquished their residency to Canada but remain citizens.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I think for Americans it's a little different, because you see the way it works for Canadians and for British people and basically for the rest of the world except the US is this. If I'm British, right, and I go and live in Australia and I become a resident of Australia, I no longer pay tax to the UK. Right? I'm now based in Australia, and as far as the UK is concerned, I'm gone. That's it. Right. But I still, every 5 years, I would go or 10 years or whatever it is, I would go and renew my UK passport, and I would just be resident in Australia. The difference is if you, actually you guys are Canadian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if someone from the States goes abroad, they still have to pay taxes and they still have to declare their taxes every year. But you don't, as a Canadian. If you go and establish residency somewhere else and you go and actually become residents in a different country, then you're no longer going to be, provided you do this all officially and legally and et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. If you tick all the boxes, then you're no longer going to be paying taxes in Canada. You're going to be paying taxes in wherever the country is that you are a resident. And that's why I mentioned the point about Panama, for example, because then you can think, well, okay, what's the different, what are the different opportunities as to where we want to go and be residents?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's cool to know.
So we want to be mindful of your time, but for everyone listening, you should absolutely go check out Jake's podcast, The Voluntary Life. There's a ton of good stuff on there, and Job Free, the book, as well. Is there anywhere people should go to connect with you, Jake?
Yeah, I think maybe just through the website, thevoluntarylife.com. You can find links to me on Twitter and other places there. And by all means, just get in touch. I also have a website for my books, which is jakedesyllas.com, and my surname is DESYLLAS. But I think just go to thevoluntarylife.com. You'll find the podcast. You'll find links to social media, and by all means, contact me through the contact page there too.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. It's been absolutely awesome to chat with you today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, guys. I hope we get the chance to meet somewhere abroad in the sunshine one day.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, if you're in Atlanta in the next little while, or
we might be in Central America.
We might be in Central America.
Yeah. All right, great. Thanks very much.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.